I have here a projector I picked up on eBay last week. It was sold as faulty, but it in the description it described the kind of code the device was reading out as a fan fault. So I thought, if it is a fan fault, then it's something I should be able to fix. And so I kind of went for it and took the risk. And so I got this back. I took it apart the other day. I started to take it apart anyway. And I believe it is actually a fan fault, which is quite nice. It's a Sahara model device, something a brand I haven't come across before. There's no obvious model number, but it seems to be the only projector that comes back if you kind of search for Sahara. That's all I can see. But I kind of took the cover off, powered it up, and took a look at the fans that were running. There's a huge amount of kind of heat management in this thing. It's quite remarkable. There's kind of multiple fans on the front. There's a fan over on this side. There's a couple of fans in here, and then there's a fan back here. And this is the one that's not running. I've taken a look at the power that's coming to this thing. It's a 3-wire fan, which is quite typical. It's kind of DC power and kind of a signal kind of line coming back, so it knows how fast it's going, and it then applies a PWM signal to the power line to adjust the speed up and down as a result. And so you can measure the voltage line. It's got a little bit of power in there, so it's trying to spin it up, but obviously it's not doing anything. It's reporting nothing back, and it enters this error state. And so this, I think, is going to be hopefully the cause of it. And I'm going to try and get it repaired or replaced, ideally. It is kind of quite wedged in here, and unfortunately I think the only real way to get this out is to remove this main circuit board, which is a bit annoying having to do that. But what I'm going to try and do first is more of a kind of a temporary fix. I can either try and blow some air through this fan externally, which will spin it up and hopefully feed back that it's running, which will kind of get it to start up. Alternatively, I might just I've got an external fan, another fan, which I can try and wire in instead. Maybe just kind of balance that outside, and that should kind of give me the data, so I know that will be at fault. There's also there's another dodgy bit on this unit here, which I'm going to try and zoom into. There's a row of transistors in here on the VGA inputs. This is the main kind of VGA input to the unit, and looks like some kind of transistor buffering going on here on the connections, and these last three appear to be damaged, but there's a lot of what might be kind of residue from reworking, so it's possible someone's attempted to repair this. There's some definite damage to other parts of the case internally. As one of the main support structures was broken off, and someone had attempted to glue it back on, and that fell out when I opened it. So it's quite possible this had blown before, and someone had actually tried to repair this. But even if it is actually, this might be damaged, and it might be a dead input as a result, but there's still kind of component input, regular kind of VGA input, and a DVI input, so I'm quite happy in that regard. Even if I can't get that to work, the lamp apparently has got some good life left in it, so I'm going to try and rig up an external fan and get this tested. Alright, I've tried blowing this externally with this fan, but there's no way enough air power to kind of get this spinning. It's possible this fan has started to seize up, so it's not going to spin as freely. But so what I've done instead, I chopped out this fan cable and wired this external one on. It's just an old one I pulled from a computer a while back, and hopefully it'll be the same kind of type and feed in. I've found in the past computer fans, or these type of kind of computer fans, all tend to be the same, so hopefully that will be good enough to run this thing. I haven't tried it yet, but the problem I was experiencing before, I'm going to get a couple of flashes from one of these lights and then a couple more from the other, just indicating an error code. And with any luck, if this works, that won't happen. What I'm going to do is put the bulb back in. Okay. The other thing I've got on here is a little kind of contact switch. This is on the hinge for the bulb door, so it knows if this is open, and so that needs to be kind of kept down. Possibly a bit more weight than that. so it doesn't think there's anything wrong. If this does work, I'm not going to run it for long. I'm not quite sure how safe it is with the airflow like this, but it's certainly enough to test it. Okay, turn it on. And this fan isn't doing anything. Okay, it's the same error code as before. No change on this thing. Doesn't even seem to be trying to spin it. I think I need to take a better look at the data or the power on this line and see what's going on. I'm just taking a look at the power on these pins, and getting 12 volts on the end terminal, which is blue here, on these three. So we're getting, the black is definitely ground, and that matches up with other ground points on here, so I'm happy with that. I kind of naturally assumed, possibly wrongly, that red was going to be positive, which is why I wired it up like so. But I'm getting a solid 12 volts on this blue connection here, and only 1 or 2 volts on here. So I'm going to try switching over the red and the blue and see if that helps. Connections have been switched. Let's try again. And let's so fold this back first of all. Got the panel with the status lights, and trigger the switch. Same again, annoyingly. So it's supposedly got 12 volts across this fan now. Yet obviously the fan isn't running, so maybe the 12 volts isn't actually the power line. It is quite possible this fan has got a completely different rating to the one in here. It does seem a little strange. I'll try and do a different measurement across here and see if that helps. So I'm a little unsure as to what cable is what now. Just from looking at a couple of these others, it's not as obvious as I was hoping. So I think I'm going to get out an oscilloscope and take a look at the two lines just to get a better idea of what type of signal is on there. Hopefully, if there is a PWM signal on the power line, that will be fairly clear, and I can then know definitively which kind of connection it is for that. So what I've done instead is plug in this fan into one of the other ports, which has a known working fan on. It didn't work, so I switched the cables back over again, red for red, and the yellow, green, blue being the data line, and it's functioning. So it's the original kind of plan. It's quite clear what was what there. And so at least I kind of now know for sure what connection is what with regards to the fan's outputs. It still leaves me with a little problem in that this isn't kind of powering up. I did notice another fan elsewhere on this side isn't running, and that I'd noticed before. And so I'm going to plug this one in over here now, instead of this one that isn't running, and see if it turns on. It's possible some of these fans don't kick in until they are needed. After all, they are using kind of these sensor lines here, or probably using the sensor lines. And so some of maybe the core ones around the lamp turn on at a low level straight away. Maybe the secondary ones surrounding the power supply wait until they're needed. And so this one here, I'm just going to check again. I can remember it isn't powering up. Yes, there's a fan just on this side here, which presumably is probably down with some kind of power supply unit. It's where the power cord comes in. But if I pull this fan out here, plug the other one in. Nothing. It's not working again. Again, it's possible they might all spin up at startup, yes, and it then has a quick check to confirm it's getting a data signal back in before turning down. That way it knows when it needs to come to actually use the fan, it's going to be there to operate. So if I turn this off and on again, if that is the case, there might be a flick from this one. No, probably not it then. I'm going to investigate some of the other fans, make sure they're spinning up, but otherwise it's a bit annoying. I might put in kind of some 12 volts into this fan here and see if that spins up, to see if it is seized or not. Because if the fans are actually correct, then it's possible the fault, rather annoyingly, will lie with some kind of controller on the board. Again, that's still not too horrendous, because I can maybe power the fan from just a direct 12 volt supply, so it's running all the time, and then hopefully this data line will feed back in. But it's the fact that two of these fans weren't powering on now, it's a little unclear as to where the actual fault lies. So this fan works if I power it directly, and I'm a little unclear as to the best kind of next step, so I think what I'm going to try and do is free up this board and get it out and just see if there's any other obvious sign of damage or problems underneath. There may be something really obvious down there. There's a few fans under here, so it's possible there's some very obvious damage with one of those. I think that's the kind of the best next step at this stage. So this board is now it's unscrewed. There's just a lot of kind of wires and connections. It's making it quite difficult to pull out. So I'm slightly nervous about damaging parts in here as well. The main optics are kind of fixed and very kind of separate parts under here. The board kind of plugs into the main kind of mirrored chip that actually does the projection with an edge connector down here, and that kind of unplugged successfully. But what I'm going to check first before I go to this effort of removing this is this fan. I'm going to power this up like I did with that one and confirm it still functions, because what I wasn't expecting was that this fan is actually a little bit more important than I thought. It's part of the main airflow, which kind of controls, it kind of deals with a lot of the heat from the light. Underneath here there's an optical arrangement where the light kind of comes through here from the lamp, shines through, and then it hits the main kind of mirrored chip, and it'll either reflect the light out if there's a bright pixel, or it will reflect the light back, I believe, in that direction, and in there's a large heat sink which is going to absorb all of that light energy and dissipate it. And this fan on the edge here is part of that arrangement, so it's possible this one should be turning on immediately. So I'm going to quickly kind of poke some power into here and see if, just to make sure this fan runs before I start pulling any more out. So that fan is functioning perfectly well, so the board's going to come out now. What I've done is mark up all these connectors. I've put little kind of pen marks across the connection on the board and the kind of actual connector itself, so I'll be able to match these up quite easily. There isn't too much of a problem because they are quite different. There's a handful of similar connectors, but the markings here will just mean that I'll easily be able to match it up and there won't be any kind of problems there. There was actually the odd mark on some of these connectors anyway, which suggested that someone may have attempted this themselves. The earth connection over here, which kind of connects in the main power supply housing through to the board, is very kind of twisted and mangled. which suggests to me someone has actually had this out and then folded the board over that way and twisted this in the process. So I'm going to try and do a similar approach. I'll leave those ones plugged in for now. I've got everything else disconnected, and see if I can get it out. So it looks like the reason it's not coming out is because the IC connector on the back here, it protrudes through quite some way, and it's probably not going to be visible under there, but it's getting caught under a mounting bracket, and it's hard to see how this is meant to come out. The IC connector screws to this back panel from the inside, so you certainly can't remove that first, and I don't really see how you can undo or remove some of these inner parts without getting this out. It's possible it's just a tight fit and it's tucked underneath somehow, but it doesn't look good. Maybe it does need to be lifted out this way, so lift up this side and then kind of lift it out like that. So I might have to remove some of these and see if I can do that. And this thing is very dusty inside, and I don't have a hoover here sadly. All I've got is Colin, which does the hoovering for me, but he's no good at something like this. So I'm just going to have to live with that. There we go. And it looks, there was a cable tie strapping the main kind of power connectors in, by the way. Over there. And yes, there's a cable tie holding the main power connectors in, which was stopping this from pulling to one side. And so, on the underside of the board, we've got a variety of, so these are all the various kind of analog feeds kind of power or kind of running into the main input section. Got a cable just running off to the edge. I think that's the rear kind of IR sensor. You've got the kind of edge connector here, which plugs onto the kind of main optical chip. Try and take a detailed look at some of these fan connections and see if there's any sign of what's going on down here. So I can't see anything on the circuit boards on the back here sadly, but before I close it up, what I'm going to do is just going to point out the optical flow here, because it's really quite interesting, especially when you compare it to the way much larger projectors or cinema projectors work. They have an arrangement where the light kind of comes out. It then enters it kind of comes through and enters a prism which splits it into the three primary colours, and they each get sent to a different device. And this chip here, this is what kind of does all the work. And this is a digital micro mirror device, and not something I knew the name before for this, but it's got a lot of kind of mirrors inside which can reflect the light out or kind of dump it away. And so the larger projectors have 3 of these in, so each one dealing with one of the kind of 3 primary colours. And then that light then gets recombined and sent out as a single image. Now what this is doing here is quite clever to kind of save cost and parts and size. It does each colour one at a time, and that's quite easy to see. If I shine a light through here, basically representing the light source, the light kind of comes through here, it passes through this filter, or this arrangement here. You can see the coloured light over here. This spins around, and it goes between kind of blue, red, and green, and then white. And so this spins really fast, and all of a sudden you've got these 4 colours or 3 colours to kind of work with. So you can, all of a sudden if you're working with the red light, and you're displaying the red image, you can kind of set the chip to project the red image. Then all of a sudden, when the blue kind of light comes along, it changes and you can display that. And this is obviously happening at a much faster frequency than the typical kind of display frequency you'd find, and so you end up with a single image, or a single kind of full colour image, but produced from three kind of made do like this. So you've only got one kind of optical arrangement here, but it's doing each colour in sequence, and then the eye kind of mixes them together. It's quite a really clever way to save space like that. Before I close it up, just there's one other chip underneath, which has got a lot of kind of flux around the edges, so it looks like it may have been reworked or replaced at some point, either in the factory, in the production line, or maybe for servicing, repairs. I find it a little surprising that someone would go to the extent of repairing parts on a device like this. The projectors they're not hugely expensive nowadays, although it is a good few years old, this one, so it's possible back in the day that it was quite pricey and worthwhile. So I've tested what I can with the fans on this unit. I've kind of switched them all out for this test one here, just in case they weren't kind of feeding back the correct data. And there's nothing, unfortunately. There's no real helpful information online that would lead me to a solution for this. The only real comments I found that the Sahara projectors were crap and to get rid of them, but so sadly I think I'm going to have to leave this one for now. I'll pack this thing up and I have to put it to one side. Hopefully I might kind of come across something, I have another idea, and be able to take another stab at it, but for now, sadly, this has kind of defeated me, unfortunately. It was a shame, but thankfully it wasn't too expensive, and it's only interesting to see this optical setup in here and how it differs to the other kind of larger projector, other types you get. So that's the end of that for now.